everybody. Thank you for joining this retrospective of surgery, which is such an achievement. And I shall kick things off, shall I?
Yes, please.
Well, Sam and George, asking you about the genesis of the story and really, you know, how the importance of Brian Clemens and what he is.
Well, you know that obviously Dad came up with the concept before. Unfortunately, never got to see it realised because he sadly passed away in 2015. But that was the catalyst to get it done very, very quickly. But it basically came up because we've been developing a feature film called The Still, and our dad thought it would be a good idea to do a short horror to sort of prove to people that we can do that to a decent level. And we were like, okay, so we need an idea about it. And my dad goes, okay, hang on. And about 30 seconds later, he had the idea straight away. And so the final product is somewhat deviated from what his original concept was, but very much the core of it was thought up in 30 seconds.
and Sam, for you, was there anything that while you were writing this that your dad taught you about the kind of process of creating drama and horror and those things that then have found themselves, you know, within the DNA of the script, really?
I don't remember the writing process of it that much. It kind of really spilled out of me very, very quickly. I mean, the idea was quite strong. I think the idea initially was that the character that Nick plays would be the same character. So he would wake up and it would be the same person, but he'd be under a mask and he wouldn't know. But I think we felt actually being on camera and so close that you would just know immediately that it was the same actor. But we thought it might be fun to subvert that. So that was the first major change that we made from Dad's script or Dad's idea in making it like two different people. But I suppose the learning about writing was his motto was, you know, a very simple one: ask to chair, pen to paper. So in essence, he would do all the drafts in his mind and then just sit down and write it. So that was sort of something that actually subsequently I didn't realize that I've ended up doing. And I found that sort of works for me. I can't move on until I've solved a problem. I present the problem. I have to solve it before I can write it. I can't write like a sort of half-solved problem. It has to be completely realised before I sit and write it.
And this is really a question to everybody with regards to sort of independent filmmaking as a whole. Anyway, you've really got to love the story because it's hard work for no financial gain. So what was it about surgery that you saw that you really wanted to be a part of this film and bring it to life, really?
I mean, I started my career, I suppose, as a bit of a scream queen. My credits include, among others, Angry Nazi Zombies, and other wonderful productions like that. So I've always loved this genre. Obviously, knowing Sam and George and knowing Brian, that was the main draw for me. And also just the passion behind it. I think for a lot of us, George and Sam, they are the draw to the project. They're exciting to work with.
Nick, what was it about playing this character for you and the story that drew you in to want to be a part of it?
Oh, my hairdresser.
Yeah.
Which
Really?
both these boys share along. Well, unfortunately not anymore because he's retired. But that's where I got to know about it. They got to know about me and then they asked me and that was that. I like the idea of, he doesn't say much at all, if anything. He just gores his way through it, pulling out eyeballs and doing all sorts of stuff.
And Jamie, for you, you know, you're the one that probably endures the most in this. Were you sorry that you took the script on once you started?
Not at all, no. I mean, I have to say I was a little dubious when somebody says, you want to come and get tortured for a weekend, you know. I did ask some questions, but as soon as I'd met them, I could gauge what they were like. And they sold me with Cliff. I'd done very little stuff with prosthetics, and he's one of the best in the business. And I was knocked out by what I'd seen, and I really wanted to. Certainly, that was, as I say, something new to me. But yeah, the whole combination, the team that they'd put together, the passion that they have, that's what got me on board.
And Cliff, for you, what was the draw?
You know, I love the horror genre. I thought it would be a good, fun thing to do. I was always a big fan of Brian's work. The reason I like doing sort of short films and things like that, as opposed to sort of big budget stuff that I work on most of the time, is, you get to look at the script and say, okay, well, what do we actually need to tell the story? On big budget films, you tend to make an effect 5 or 6 ways, and the director decides on the day which way he's going to shoot it, which is tremendously expensive, And this stuff can cost loads of money, or it can cost very little money. If you can say to the directors, okay, well, this is what we've got. This is how you shoot it. And when you do that, it usually works fine. So, yeah, I think that was probably the main draw.
I think it was just, I'd worked with Sam and George before, and we were good friends, and it's just always such a good time on set and working together. It's one of those great collaborations where you can also, you have fun and you just have a great time on set, and anything we do together is just a blast. That was the first thing. I was like, whatever it is, yes. And then tell me what it is.
I had worked with the guys as well before, and it was just so much fun to be on set. So I obviously would have passed on the opportunity to do it again. But then as soon as I read the script, I was like, okay, this can be something very exciting for set design. I just loved the script, loved working with the guys. But it was a really fun birthday present for me because it was my birthday while we were shooting. So it was just great fun just to hang out with my friends on my birthday and just film and just have a really good time.
And Ted, what did you love about the story?
I have a very vivid memory. Sam, if you don't remember, we chatted about surgery in Greenwich. But the original idea and draft that I read was twice as long, twice as gory. And if you look at the film of Surgery, it's got so many incredible moments, and it's done just incredibly well at different festivals around the world. And I'm just over the moon.
And Agam, finally, for you, just about the script and the story, and when you first saw Surgery.
It has so many beats to be packed into 10 minutes. And the reveal and everything at the end, it's so well put, and it tells about the prowess of the entire team, of how they managed to put everything on visual display.
The opening shot, the impact that you have, it feels really sort of cinematic. Really, my first question here is to Fernando about creating that viewpoint and making it have such a visual impact and making it have such a large scope.
The whole thinking behind that is to give you that sense of isolation and also kind of a little sense of randomness. You're just flying through fields and you arrive at this barn, and then this is happening inside there, and it sets the world quite well visually, I think. And
then for the actors, how was it working within such a real environment helpful for you, and finding that spatial awareness?
That barn has so many Winnebagos in it. I thought, you shouldn't have bothered. Ridiculous.
Lara, for you, what was it like when you first sort of step onto that set?
I think Anna just did such a good job, and there's so much detail in it as well that you don't get to see. But there was somebody. There's lots of videos. I'm sure someone will say this. There's loads of videos online, reaction videos from people that are amazing to watch. You've got to YouTube them if you haven't seen them, of people's reactions to the film. And there's someone who pauses and they zoom in to read what's been said. Luckily, Anna's done it all beautifully, so everything is written out. But yeah, the detail was amazing.
And Sam, this location is something that goes back to your childhood. Can you share with us, how important and how relevant it was for you to be filming this film there?
I remember always going past the barn, and the barn originally had massive wooden doors. And I remember as a kid looking through and just seeing all those caravans, in this long line going almost to my child brain to infinity. I was like, it just felt so long. I was like, someone needs to make something here because it's just such a bizarre location. And it's always been in the back of my mind. So when we decided to do the idea actually came out of where can we shoot something. And so Dad's idea, we always said we were going to try and use that barn because we knew the farmer who owned it would allow us to shoot there. So we sort of retrofitted it. So we worked from the location backwards. knowing that we could go in there. We didn't quite know how we were going to build in there, what we were going to do. And also that barn has been on camera before. They shot an episode of The Avengers back in the 60s with Linda Thorson there called Noon Doomsday. So in a whole episode was shot round our house, and with Steed and Tara King and all that. And that whole section was round all those barns. So it's already been on camera. And also some of the bits that we fly over were used in Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter. And our house is used as a location from a distance. So it's appeared in a Hammer Horror and Avengers, and it sort of felt like, I'd like to do something here. It was a scary barn, and I was like, people need to see in here because it's so weird. No one will believe what is in here. And everyone's thoughts are all the caravan sort of people that he's murdered or taken? Is he the man killer? But it gives you an ambiguity to it because it's very, very strange.
Absolutely. And Anna, can I speak to you really about you creating this sort of the environment, really? I mean, you're walking in there and you must have had a treasure trove of things already that you could utilise, particularly in the scenes with Nick.
The way I kind of approached this was I just wanted to create two different worlds, just so the reveal at the end was even more impactful. It was an existing barn, so all we had to do was just dress it and add a lot more texture than what was already there. And, we used the color palette that was already there, a lot of browns, a lot of earth tones. And then when we moved to the hospital set, we just wanted it to look very clinical. We wanted it to look clean. We wanted it to resemble a real operating theater. And this is what really, I suppose, tricked the audience at the end when the big reveal happened that these two sets were right next to each other.
I remember there being a challenge, actually, because when you're filming each set separately, you can put the lights whatever you want, and obviously you build each lighting setup for each shot. I remember one of the challenges we had was that big reveal at the end. We couldn't have any film lights. We couldn't have any lights that we were using in view, because then it would, but those sets still need to look like what we saw them before when I had all my lighting in.
And then sort of going on to the acting side of things, Nick, you really did look like you were relishing applying that torture.
Oh, yes. There were lots of little dishes with bits in, bits of cadaver all over the place. So, that was all fun. And I just liked, the lack of any dialogue in the sense of explanation. Didn't need it. And you could do it all with the looks and that which is filmic.
Cliff, but I wanted to ask you about the prosthetics, makeup and working with Jamie. Had Sam and George given you a certain idea of how they wanted Jamie to be presented, or was that something that you were able to use kind of your own imagination with?
I had actually planned on something a bit more extensive for Jamie. And in the end, on the day, I just sort of stripped it all back, really, and thought, well, we don't actually need pieces around the nails and things like that. So the nails were literally just hollow tubes that were glued directly to his face. And then we had a very thick blood that was all around the nails. So to hide the little plates that were holding them in place. There were certain things we couldn't do with Jamie, obviously, that we had to use a fake head for. Things like pulling the doll's head out of the eye and things like that. But again, I mean, it wasn't a life cast of Jamie. It wasn't Jamie's head. I think it was James McAvoy's.
It never looked good.
But I knew he'd have sort of bandages around his eye and things like that. I knew we didn't have the right haircut. So, just by planning where the shots were going to take place and how much you actually needed to see to tell the story, you can get away with so much. Obviously, the nails coming out and things like that was all done on the fake head. So Jamie got off fairly lightly, I have to say, in comparison to most people I work with, who I really do torture.
Well, it was still a privilege, Cliff.
We did glue your mouth shut, though, didn't we, Jamie?
Oh, yeah, I did do. Yeah, I forgot about it. Minor thing, yeah.
I remember that was because we had to we go, right, okay, we're going to glue his mouth shut now. So anything you want to say, you've got to say it now.
That's right.
And you were
scribbling notes.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's when they called lunch.
Yeah.
And I suppose, Sam, I mean, you're obviously acting, you're directing. Do you have to be sensitive to Jamie, switch off being an actor and then actually go into director mode, or was that something you left for George? How did you balance that, actually?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's very helpful when you have a director team, because I would sort of focus on what I was doing acting wise, and then go and have a look at the monitor afterwards. But the thing is, Fernando and George and I sat and discussed it quite a bit. We'd arranged, I think we really had budgeted like something ridiculous, like 50 setups in 2 days. And we ended up, I think, with 27. So, but that meant that we had to be creative, and we had to do exactly like what Cliff was saying about being economical with what you're showing. We had to then be economical with what is important. What do we need to see? What is going to tell the story? There wasn't like a worry of the coverage, so I could relax in terms of the acting. I do remember there was one bit I would think I was going in to pull the eye out, and there had to be a bit of blood that was flecked on me, and Cliff squirted me fully in the eye with a full syringe of blood, and I tried to continue, but I couldn't because it was so funny, and I was blind.
Yeah, well, we just thought we'd give that a go for one row, because we were doing some and it was very minuscule, and we said, let's just do it when we do the full whack, and then it just looked insane, and it was very funny. And yeah, Sam did battle on with it, but ultimately that didn't make the cut because it just looked insane.
George, you just mentioned one of the complicated shots that you had to do. Was that the one where Lara is leaving the scene of the crime, so to speak?
That is one of the one I was referring to is actually the main reveal, where we track across from Jamie across to Sam with Nick popping up, and then finally onto Lara, and then finishing on the stereo. That was a very technical one, but then obviously the one coming through with Lara had a lot of problems, because a lot of people don't realise that's shot on a drone. We had a lot of problems with, because it's a barn, it's very dusty, that would blow up and then it would throw all the sensors off. So that took a lot of takes. And then we had a issue where we just couldn't quite get the machine to work from when it left the barn, because the initial idea was to move all the way with Lara out the barn and continue. And then as an audience, we'd be like, oh, wow, this is all one shot. But because it kept whiting out, in the edit, I just went, you know what, it's a shame, because it'd be nice to have that, but actually it makes a perfect title point as well.
What we haven't covered yet, we've covered obviously a lot of the visuals, is the sound.
Sadly, Ed White, our composer and sound designer, can't be here this evening, but we spent a long time at his sort of doing all wonderful sound design bits to sort of try and get what constitutes the nail going into a head, and it ended up being sort of, we used a hammer and a nail, but hammering into a coconut with a little bit of, I think, melon, like we hit a melon, and then we cut a little bit of kiwi, and all those elements together make a little with the little fleshy, the clunk, but it took ages. We spent a long time getting all those bits right, because I think the thing is, people think it's a lot more violent than it is. It is a very violent film, but a lot of it is what you don't see, and you put your own impressions of what's happening onto it. And so sound design plays an enormous part. I mean, on the circuit of this, George and I have been to various festivals and things and screenings. We've had people fainting at screenings. It's happened like multiple times. And I felt like we should have paid people to do this. Like, we should have thought about that. That's a great bit of marketing. But people actually did. And one very funny one was some guy fainted at a table full of doctors, which couldn't have been it. And they stopped the film, and they had to check he was okay, obviously, and then they continued with that. And it's always at the same point, I think, as the nail.
It's the nail coming out. It's sort of surprising. You'd think it'd be the doll's head or like something else, but no, it's something about the medical thing that just, I don't know, got people.
There's one bit as well where you hear this, as well as you see, obviously, the blood coming over, and it's just, and it does make you go, oh, in a good way. Cliff, for you, what's the charm of horror, of what you see and what you don't see?
I'm not a huge fan of gore. I do like creatures, but I think you should see them sparingly, and you should shoot them in the best possible light. I mean, most creatures look great in some lighting, but they don't look great from every angle. The main maxim, I think, is to keep them moving fast, keep them in the dark, and keep them wet, and you usually manage to get away with things if you do that.
I think all of you can be commended on is that you've created a film here that, even though it's an independent film and it's a short film, it's got huge production value and it feels very cinematic. Fernando, it has a very kind of noir-esque kind of feel, and I've said to Sam before, and also a nod to the Hammer Horrors. Was that something that you, Sam, and George had discussed with regard to the aesthetic of the film?
Yes, it was. It's also, I just love the shadows. It's just one of those things. I just can't help myself. So I think it was a good marriage between what we were meant to do and also the fact that I love to shoot like that. I love high contrast. For me, the key with visual storytelling is to direct the eye somewhere and to let the imagination do the rest. If you just show absolutely everything and it's an overload of information, you're not really telling a story. It's more like a documentary. So I just love to not see much. So it was great for this.
And Anna, for you, when you're working in film, how do you feel about what we should see and what we shouldn't see?
I think that's what we're trying to create, really. Just create a world, transport the audience into that world, and then it's up to them to just let their imagination run wild on how these items are going to be used on these characters.
I think what the other thing that's quite remarkable about this film is how perceptions change. We obviously have one perception of a person, and then by the time we've got to the story in a very short space of time, the whole perception of everything has changed. Do you think that's the cleverness of the writing?
It is that whole thing of the man who walks in fear and dread because he knows that close behind a frightful fiend doth tread. And it's always that feeling. There's something coming. But seeing it can be a disappointment. But in our case, I don't think it was, because it was pretty gory anyway.
What it taps into is that it could have been gratuitous, but when you find out the story is a revenge story,
yeah, exactly,
and that's something everybody relates to, doesn't it? And we all instantly buy into that.
Yeah. Now that's the cleverness of the script, that whole bit that, they've been through a lot, this whole family thing. So it was good to explore that a bit. But I do think that very much what you don't see is really what scares the bejesus out of you.
And Ted, I just wanted to talk to you about the importance of being able to put short films into festivals, and how important are festivals and accolades to help the film and filmmakers become more marketable, really?
Yeah, the film festival circuit is incredibly important. And in terms of being able to prove the talent of all the individuals, the cast and the crew, that's what independent filmmakers do. They say, this is, this proves the talent. Now, the accolades are nice, and the awards that Sam and George have won are lovely. But fundamentally, the festival circuit allows people to get noticed, films to get noticed around the world. So I'm absolutely over the moon. I mean, it's watched more than 3 million times, more, 4 million times. It's got recognised. It's a wonderful, wonderful, happy ending to Brian's, initial idea.
And Agam, would you like to tell us a little bit more about Take the Shot Films and what you're hoping for the future as a production company?
At Take the Shot Films, we have a portfolio of films that we are working on right now. And we came together to form the company because we had worked with each other over the years in different capacities. So there was obviously an element of familiarity, but more importantly, we felt that we shared the same values. And apart from our love for cinema, we wanted to tell stories with a more modern twist, more aware, socially conscious, and bringing modern sensibilities to stories that belong to classic genres. And we want to show that going green and making independent films can go hand in hand. Right now, we have a female-centric Western that we want to shoot in Almeria, south of Spain, locations of the original spaghetti Westerns. We are really excited about this one, and it was actually Sam's story idea for this film that brought us together. And then we have a thriller, which is an adaptation of Brian Clemens' play Strictly Murder, set just before the Second World War. Then we have a horror film, obviously, a docuseries on LGBTQ rights, a few ideas that we are toying with for TV series. In short, we are keeping our hands full.
Lots of ambitious plans. And so as we start to kind of wind things up, because time actually is slipping past us, I just wanted to ask you all if you've got a nice kind of lasting memory of working on Surgery that you'd like to share with us.
Even now, like watching the film, like knowing how it was made and knowing, like watching Cliff like glue things to Jamie's face, I'm still like, and it's watching Jamie's toes curl. Like you saying, like what you see and what you don't see. Like obviously you have Cliff, who's the best in the business, so you want to see everything that he does, but also the performance is so important from Jamie. And I think just like the tiny things, like him curling his toes and just like his reactions are just sell it completely.
I remember walking past your from the house where we did most of the makeup. You walked past the fence. I remember seeing your neighbour horrified as I was done up to the worst or various stages. I'd usually be smoking while I walked past her, so it kind of took the edge off. But the poor woman, she was traumatized.
I think one of the funny moments was probably trying to squirt some blood into Sam's face, Sam's eye. It was just hilarious. That was quite funny. The entire crew behind the camera was just in stitches.
My abiding memory is Mrs. Clemens and her lunches. She was brilliant, and she gave over the whole house to us, which was wonderful.
It's just great when things work, and it's the actors that make them work. As I said before, it's silly. It's just lumps of rubber and food coloring and Caro syrup, and it's completely down to the dedication of the actors to make this bit of make believe. It's a magic trick. People know how it's done. But if you can pull it off, it's still very alluring when it works. So.
It's like one big memory, because it was also very challenging, I have to say. We haven't talked about it. It was a very challenging shoot because we had very little time, a lot to accomplish. It was very ambitious. We had no money to accomplish all of this. So everybody had such goodwill. Everybody pulled together, and it was just beautiful. It was, despite the challenges and how cold it was in there. And so it was just like one big, great community of people, just no egos, no nothing, just trying their best.
I suppose sort of the greatest moment was probably when we were at the premiere at Fright Fest in Leicester Square, like finally getting to see it on the big screen with a big audience and everything else. And, it's just nice to see that and know that our tribute to our dad had been successful and had hit the biggest screen we could have possibly done.
The one thing that felt quite serendipitous is that we were screening Fright Fest with Dad's film Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter at the same time in the same festival, which sort of felt like he was there with us, which was a lovely sort of tribute there. But I think that Fernando said something about the goodwill of everyone. Everyone really. It's all built like that. Films are made through relationships, and whether you get on with people, building those relationships to work together and continue to work together, it's all about that. And luckily we've got a great group of friends and talented professionals that like working with us, and we love working with them. And when Jamie first came on, and Jamie was under the press, I was really like, is it going to kill him? And it was the first time that Jamie sort of had to scream of any description, and we'd sort of discussed it. And when he did it the first time, I remember it sent chills through the entire set because it was really horrifying. And it sort of set the tone for where we were allowed to go from then on. And I remember that moment sort of being given, everyone has suddenly taken it seriously. And just hearing that sound sort of, for me, solidified all the work that we'd done, that it would work. And I think that the reveal at the end, when we fought really hard to get that last shot and to hold it for that length of time in the sort of, I'm going to say it in the Kubrickian style, wearing the Shining T-shirt for Happy Halloween, everyone. But to let that information register, because most people would cut. And I just felt that I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but every time I watch it, it allows people that time to go, oh my God, that's happened. And I've watched audience members, some that were like, this is just, I can't believe it, switch and go, oh, he so deserved it. Good, I'm glad. The perception has changed of the film and the reaction of it. I think it is always exciting. Watching the reaction videos still, is very rewarding. But I think just seeing all these faces here today is probably one of the most rewarding things, is that we're all back here 5 years later talking about it. I mean, what could be more validating than that, really?
Well, you certainly, all of you collaboratively created a really extraordinary film, and you should all be very proud of yourselves. So thank you very much for joining us today for this retrospective.
Thank you.
Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Thanks, Claire, for hosting us.